Good morning, or I guess it's good afternoon for those of you who are in the morning session. Welcome to Enabling Student Analytics. My name is Holly Drake. I am the Chief Privacy Officer at The Ohio State University, and I am joined today with.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan Klapper. I'm a fourth-year undergraduate student here at The Ohio State University. I've had the pleasure of working with Holly the past couple of years on the Ohio State's privacy program and bringing a student voice to the conversation. Looking forward to our presentation today, guys, and a great discussion. All right, so just getting started, we're a quick outline of what we're going to be doing today. We're going to do a quick outline, quick conversation around the ethical use of data. And then we're going to go into a little bit of the journey of the privacy program here that we have constructed at Ohio State. A lot of the work that we've done, just kind of giving a brief background. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the student analytic principles that we have crafted together as a group of students, faculty, staff, and administrators. And then we're going to apply those principles in a conversation and try to get some good conversation going about some scenarios that you face with student analytics and how you apply the principles that we have crafted into those scenarios. So looking forward to it.
That's cool. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the journey we were on and start out with privacy and the ethical use of data. When I think about sort of the playing field and how the privacy regulations and privacy programs have evolved over the past, especially last 15 years, but particularly in the last 3 to 5, the regulations and compliance programs can be a good place to start when it comes to thinking about the risks that student analytics can have on an organization and to the individual. But the challenge is that even if you comply with privacy laws, you can still harm the people whose data you are using. So if a privacy law is highly based on consent, for example, it might not include enough rigor around data processing risks. So some of the risks that can happen with student analytics could be disparate impact, right? So an analytic could inadvertently affect one population over another and harm those individuals. And so that is the playing field that we're in today. At Ohio State, we started our journey to create student analytic principles with the privacy program simply because it was a established forum that had lots of university partners. We had engaged with students, faculty, and staff, and they were interested in this topic. And so using the privacy program and the privacy team as sort of the folks to gather the thought leaders for the discussion ended up working for Ohio State. It might not work in every organization. It's just sort of where we started at Ohio State. So here's the opportunity that our working group came up with. We started thinking about using advanced analytics and AI, and we needed to determine where the ethical lines are and how to avoid transgressing them. And so at Ohio State, we refer to these as the should we questions. We can do this technically, we can do it legally, but should we? And the working group we pulled together, we had a small group that reports up to our Privacy Governance Council and also to our Compliance Council and our Risk Management Council. This small working group was comprised of students, faculty, and staff, data analytics experts, institutional researchers, sort of the gamut of people who are interested in sort of figuring out how we can do more with data. And the opportunity is large. There are a lot of cases we've seen where people were reluctant to sort of unleash the power of student analytics because they weren't sure what those ethical boundaries were, or what is a forum to think about those ethical boundaries. And the student analytics journey, the creation of those principles became the sort of the anchoring starting point for thinking about different opportunities we wanted to seize. So that's how the working group started. We met, it took us a while. So we worked on these pretty diligently for about 9 months, I would say. Our starting document was actually the Unison Learning Analytics Principles, which the Unison had a working group on working on these for a while as well. And I'm curious if anybody could go to the chat. Have any of you seen the Unison Learning Analytics Principles? Did you participate in creating them? Anyone? This is going to be a chatty session. get ready to talk. No one? All right. Well, we'll start to see what they look like. A colleague here helped. Oh, thank you for chiming in, Heather. All right. So with that little background, there's a huge array of opportunity for student analytics that Ohio State wanted to use. We wanted to have principles to help us navigate those ethical boundaries. And we had a working group put them together. And I'm going to show, Jordan's going to take us through the first of what they are. Da, da, da. I will add a link to the chat while you're talking, Jordan.
Yes, absolutely. No, for sure. That'll be great. I think before we get into it, so we want to talk a little bit about why we chose to do student analytics versus Unison's focus of learning analytics as we begin the conversation. So when we kind of enter this conversation, we're trying to define where we wanted the boundaries of these principles to be set. And it was really actually kind of the start of COVID. I think that we first started the kind of the student analytics conversation. And one of the conversations we had was around what is the boundary drawn between a learning analytic and a student analytic? Because students inherently, they're going to be doing things like going to the gym and eating meals on campus and doing things like that, that are, while not inherently related to learning and are not ran through like a learning management system, is going to be impacting their learning experience and their experience at the university. And there's lots of data that's collected about students on campus that is impacting their daily lives and their experience here at the university and not just their learning. So seeing that opportunity, we wanted to kind of broaden it to student analytics. And the student analytics as a whole, these principles are trying to be very, broad and opening to the idea of how can we enable rather than, work against people? How can we enable them to do new and cool things and new and powerful things that are helping students? Which kind of brings us to this first principle, student success. So with student success, student analytics must first work for student and their success. Students are empowered to make their own decisions, and we strive to provide guidance through the use of analytics. Basically, this principle is saying, how can we make sure that analytics that we are doing are seeking to help the students that they are about, right? We want to make sure that these are providing guidance, not making decisions for the students, but they are helpers along the way. And that's really one of the key ideas behind this first principle. Sean, I see you adding the Michigan Learning Analytics principles as well in the chat. Those were also some of our inspiration that we had when we were crafting these principles as well. Read those over many times kind of through our conversation and referred back to them. So thank you for that. So our next principle is respect. Student analytics must respect the dignity of each student. The university thoughtfully considers contextual integrity when using personal information for student analytics. The university values student privacy and only uses personal identifiers when it is necessary or would be used to support a specific individual student. So this one really ties back to some of our original privacy program that we established. We worked on creating some privacy principles for the university. And those privacy principles can also be found on Ohio State's website. But this is kind of encompassing a lot of different things. How can we respect the individual student and make sure that we're thinking critically about the analytic that we are creating? Making sure that we are, looking at things like bias and making sure that we are careful with the information that we're gathering around students and that we're not violating people's, right to own their own information as at the university. And I think this is one of the principles that really empowers students to think powerfully in a positive manner around student analytics and really helps them, understand the value in it as well. Holly, I think you might be muted.
Thank you, sir. Whoops, sorry about that. Thank you. Transparency is can be kind of a little more self-explanatory, but it's tricky to implement. Student analytics must be transparent. The university provides a transparent privacy notices and communications about the use of student analytics. Students should have a clear understanding about how their analytics data is collected, used, analyzed, shared, and reported. this was a principle we spent a lot of time talking about, particularly that last sentence, because if you work in the data field and the privacy field, you know that being clear about how information is collected, used, and shared is really tricky when the volume of data that you're collecting, using, and sharing is so big. Getting consent at a data element isn't typically practical. In this case, we sort of said this is an important principle, and the working group right now is working to continue to operationalize these principles, and this will be a big part of our focus over the next year. The last one we started with was accountability. Student analytics must follow accountability and governance processes. The university is committed to ensuring equity, security, privacy, and quality by continuously evaluating the impact of student analytics. The university also implements organizational policies, processes, and technical measures to address concerns and mitigate harm, particularly unintended ones. This principle became really important because we had to, as a working group, we really had to settle on, are we publishing principles for people to use sort of like as they like, hey, here's something to consider? Or are we really talking about implementing a review process through which when an analytic reaches a certain threshold or certain likeliness of harm, that a working group actually considers the analytic and considers these principles against it? And it was a pretty vigorous debate. We landed on working to implement an operational process, and those are the steps that we're taking on right now. And having an accountability aspect of the principles is really important to get to that point. All right. So clicking around here. Any questions from the group on sort of the journey so far? We're going to pivot to a little bit of group discussion about how we think about learning analytics or student analytics when it comes to some specific scenarios. What questions do you have? How many of you are implementing student analytics or learner analytics now at your organization? Or is anybody going through this journey? Early stages, beginning stages. Ooh, Carrie, would you mind coming off mute and sharing a little bit about what you're doing with this student engagement project? That seems particularly interesting.
Howdy, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, thanks. Yep, I'm Kari Jordal. I'm with UW-Madison. We did a survey that got sent out to students, and we got really good completion on it because we posted it as an announcement in our LMS. So we got, I can't remember now if it was 700 or 800 responses. So we did some preliminary questions just around what students might be interested in. And for the past couple of weeks, we've been going to our student unions and doing like about 7 to 10 minute quick conversations with students and showing them screenshots of several other student facing learning analytics tools and asking them, can you read this? And might this be something you would use? So it's been really interesting. And yeah, we're excited about it. We're hoping that we can pilot something in the fall, but yeah, we're on that journey, and it's interesting. No results yet. So
it's really interesting that you're showing them a student analytic that's really defined for their benefit. So that seems to be a really fundamental part of your program, which is really cool to think about it from the student first, student success first. We're not just doing it for the university's benefit. It should be both. I like it.
Yeah, well, and to be honest, we have also done, we do have an instructor dashboard, and we did a really small pilot for advisors. So we've had students on our roadmap to work with for a few years. And so we're excited that we can get to actually working with them now.
Nice. I see some questions in the chat. Have you informed all of your students about how LA works at your institution? All students, It's always hard to do that. We have not done what Kari is describing, and I took a note to figure that out. The step we're in right now is more communication, a communication plan, a training module, and working with the folks that are creating and want to use the analytics to figure out what are some of the use cases. So what's been a little bit of a struggle is when it comes to learning analytics, the tools are a little more mature and the use cases are a little clearer. The other possibilities are a little more abstract. And so getting some concrete, what do people want to do, has been a little bit of a journey for us. I know it'll come, and it'll come like a fire hose. And so what we're trying to do is get ahead of it with that one. And it's higher ed, nothing is perfect, right? You try to corral as much as you can with the processes you have, but it's always hard in higher ed to say every and all. When it comes to our LMS, it's easy to say every and all because I have a close partner there and we can make sure those things are in place. But when it comes to any piece of technology, it's a bit aspirational, but we're still working on it. Jordan?
What I will add also is we've done some events through our privacy program, like on Data Privacy Day this year, as well as the past couple of years. We've done some events sharing some of the work that we're completing around student analytics principles. So when we had a draft of student analytics principles this past Data Privacy Day, we invited anybody that wanted to come from across the university community. Students came, faculty, everyone came to kind of engage in that conversation about student analytics and the principles that we had gathered and get some feedback on them. And then we've also started some first year success series sessions that also we are kind of engaging some first year students and teaching them about privacy, about some analytics, and in a broader sense. We kind of wanted to approach it from an educational perspective since we are students here to learn. So
two more good questions before we get to some scenarios. So I like that you guys are getting warmed up for some thinking. Do you have a process for opting out? We have some processes for based on an application. So some of the processes could be you can opt out of this particular use case using this particular tool. We do not have a broad opt me out of every use of analytic. That's not something we've developed yet. Has anybody else done something like that? It's would be really hard to do, I think. But we'll see where this journey takes us. Reframe as student analytics, not just learning analytics. It's just really adding all that extra data that could be used to augment learning analytics. I think most of our use cases are really around learning analytics because that is an outcome that we're trying to measure. But if you think about a lot of the data you can collect about students, so mobility data, Wi-Fi data, using the fitness center that are not directly related to coursework, but you might want to analyze as part of having a healthy and well experience. So we wanted it to be broad because we wanted it to include all of those types of ancillary data. Google Analytics, all of that. Opt out of LA applications, that's what exactly. Enterprise advising solutions. I feel like the stuff that my advisors are doing with analytics, they sometimes call it analytics, but it's really technologically operationalizing a human decision. So it's much more like we've decided if these things happen, a human has decided if these things happen, the technology can speed that up. And that's not quite the same as like machine learning. And so we're still kind of growing in that space. Yeah, one more question. Where are you adding that data to? Oh, there's a data lake. So probably all universities have a very large data lake that ours is called the reporting analytics environment. It's pretty sort of robust for most organizations. And then just pools and pools of data stores that are collected together to run the analytics. Predictive, I keep pushing on it. I feel like it must be out there. They want to do predictive analytics. And so some of it could be nudges, propensity to not succeed in a class. What I start getting, the same example I give that it's hard. We're not doing this right now, right? But the example could be, I know that a student from this zip code +4, so this region of the city, is unlikely to succeed in this class. And I'm going to immediately start intervening when that student arrives, or immediately start trying to change their major and really affect their ability to have agency over their choices. And that to me is the thing we're trying to think through carefully. I'm not hearing that we're doing that at Ohio State. That's just the example I use a lot to get people thinking about some of the advanced analytics instead of more automated reporting or automated a human decision, which is often called human in the loop, which is good. So sometimes the scenario I give is like, Jordan failed his last math class and the computer just disenrolls him, changes the lock on his dorm, packs up his dorm, calls an Uber, loads the Uber, and he comes back to his residence hall and needs to leave the university. We don't want the computer to be making all of those decisions. We want a human to be making those decisions. Well, I love it when people agree. Yeah. Our student advisor sits on our working group and is always about human in the middle, human making the decision, human communicating. The AI or the analytic can just inform the advisor to make a well-rounded recommendation. All right, now you guys are warmed up. Keep adding stuff to the chat. We're going to go through some scenarios. You don't have to remember the Ohio State University student analytics principles specifically, but these are just some ethical quandaries that I just wanted to have a discussion about. So I told you at the beginning, our path is how do we find these ethical boundaries? So there are many, many things that are like okay and no worries, but then how do you find those things on the fringes that you really want to make sure you're considering before you go forward? So as I put this together, I just want to give a shout out. So special thanks to Pavani Reddy from EAB. She's the author of Ethical Product Development, and she worked with us and others to create these scenarios, which we'll be sharing with you today. So shout out to EAB. All right, so we're going to have a hypothetical discussion of a university called Woodley. I don't think there's a Woodley University that's actually real, but it's not, these are just not real. The scenarios that Pavani put together are like hashtag taken from the headlines, and so they're somewhat real, but she condensed them to make it work for these smaller conversations. So what I'm curious about is I do not see a concern here, which is a number one. I see a concern, and here's what I think you should do about it. And so as we go through some of the scenarios, we're going to ask you to start by going to the chat and typing in 1 or 2. 1, no concern, 2, concern. And then when we say go, then hit enter so we can see the stream of what folks are thinking, and then we'll have a little discussion about what you're thinking with these different types of analytics. Make sense? All right. I don't see heads nodding. Thumbs. Waterfall. I couldn't think of the word. Thank you. It's like it's on the tip of my tongue. Okay, Jordan, you ready to take it away?
Absolutely.
Here's the first one.
All righty. So again, our fictional college here, Woodley College. So here's our first scenario. In the admissions process, demonstrated interest of applicants indicated by online engagement, time spent on the website, requests for more information, click-through of email and interaction with social media is a major admissions factor for Woodley. So go ahead and type into the chat, but don't hit send just yet. We will wait just for everybody to get into the chat. I'll give it like a 5 seconds. All right, go ahead and chop it in the chat.
It's looking pretty evenly divided. This is how it showed up last time, about half and half. All right, who said 1, no concern, and talk to me about why you felt like no concern. It's not a trick question. This is just ethical boundaries, right? There's not right or wrong. It's just sharing of ideas. Who hit 1? What do you think? Oh, 1 is no concern. 2 is concern. Oh, change mine to 2. No worries. You can change your mind. So who's no concern? Number one, no concern. I have a master's degree in social work and I'm very comfortable with silence, but somebody come off mute or I will have to call on a one person. This, just for simplicity, this is kind of a complex behind the scenes situation, but it was a major factor in the admissions process. Ooh, Anne's off camera. What do you think? What do you think? You turned the camera on.
I did. I mean, I put a 2, but if you don't mind, I could explain my decision.
Yeah, please.
There's, if you're using data like how much time someone spends on a website, maybe how fast they click through it and things, I think there's a risk there of discriminating against people with certain disabilities, maybe people who use a screen reader or some kind of assistive technology, people with cognitive disabilities who may take more time to click through a website. So that's just the first thing that comes to mind. And I wonder if when you're using this kind of data, if you can do some analytics to sort of see if you're discriminating against certain groups. I don't know a lot about data science yet, but I think there are ways you can sort of look at your model and try to test it out to see if there's bias.
Yeah, or at least monitor the sort of the model over time. I like it. So you could be inadvertently discriminating with this practice, even if, on the one hand, if you put a 1 and you might have said something like, well, if your privacy notice discloses that you do this practice, you are giving notice. So you have that like privacy legal thing sort of covered, but then you have this ethical question of what is the ramification of just giving notice and not being really clear, is a good one. What else? What else do you think? Oh, raising hand, yay. Allison?
Yeah, it just occurred to me. Oh, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
It just occurred to me that I had kind of interpreted a use that this would be put to, and it was kind of maybe not exactly how it was being used. And so the subsequent usage of this data are being clear on the use case for collecting this data, because it struck me that if it was used for just informing admissions officers outreach to get students excited about applying, which was what I'd assumed the usage was, versus actually being a factor in the admission decision, there's just different ethical questions. So the clarity of how it will be used made a difference.
I like it. Dave?
Yeah, I voted 2 on this one. One of the first things that came to mind was if there's data or technology pieces that go wrong here, like someone's running a privacy blocker or other things.
They could use a bot.
Yeah, or vice versa, right? Yeah, a bot, they figure out how to game the system. They're like, oh, I get admitted and I'll hire a botnet to come click on all my links, right? And so it's that data is being recorded from human behavior in the system, but are there times where it could go wrong and lead to wrong interpretations or wrong assumptions of things, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, Laura, do you want to go?
I too am a 2er. And it struck me right away that this is a bad idea because there are so many ways that it has a bias. It would have a bias towards even alum usually, or next generation, right? My mom and dad went to this school, and I don't do that process on internet because I already have connections and I already know about it and I'm extremely interested. On the flip side, I think was mentioned in the chat a couple of times is that's not my main way of getting information where I don't have access to the internet. My main way of getting information is campus visits or speaking to a counselor over the phone. So it's got a lot of bias in it. Thank you.
Well, I'll give you like a couple of 2 cents and then we'll go to another one so we can get through a couple of them. Like when you work through these, they're not always crystal clear how to fix it, right? So if this came to our review board, we would talk a lot about what is the purpose. So a lot of you had questions about data processing. So is it a primary use? Is it a secondary use? Is it weighted? How do you counterbalance the bias that we've all talked about? This practice is not the world's craziest practice in the world. So if you have the ability to connect with your admissions department, there are thinking about how you build a bigger digital footprint, take that digital print of an applicant and understand how they could A, be successful, B, be admitted, what encourages them to say yes to a university is something I promise you they're thinking of. And a lot of large entities are thinking about this technology too, and provide this technology. So this is not even like, this is existing today, can be used by universities easily, technology. To cover, because we weren't sure, we updated our web privacy statement to at least talk about using analytics in this way. So at least we had that transparency piece. And then through the working group, then we have admissions in our working group. And as they start thinking about how they want to use analytics in the process, we will do a full analysis, but we're not doing this particular one today.
All righty.
We'll quickly on things.
I also wanted to shout out a few things in the chat.
Yeah.
A lot of people were talking about the potential bias among people that don't have devices, live in rural areas, limited access to internet, and things like that. In addition to the other things that we had already talked about that created bias. But did we want to move on to the next topic? I'm sure some people have probably already read it, but I'll go ahead and read over that.
Let's go, because we only have about 13 minutes. Let's see what people are thinking.
Yep. Just a reminder, 1 is not concerned, 2 is you have a concern. So Woodley College is engaged in a pilot to understand students' predicted career success based on various aspects of their college writing samples. All right, 3, 2, 1, drop in the chat.
1.5. Ooh, I moved it, sorry. Where are we? Can't click 2 things at once. Lots of 1s, a couple of 2s. I kind of want to breeze through this one a teeny bit. Oh, Laura's going to start us off. Go ahead. Your hand is raised, Laura. Did you mean, or did you just keep it up from before?
I think it's up from before, sorry.
Oh, no worries. It's too broad a jump to be feasible, except data analysts always think they can do whatever they want. The things like pilot make me feel like they're just sort of trying it out. It could have all of the bias concerns that we talked about before. I like the idea of trying it out and see what works before you keep going. And then to me, transparency, and then so giving notice that that's a practice that you have, and then pausing before you go forward to evaluate, is it working, is it effective, is there actually a correlation to according to what everyone in the chat is saying. Yes. Anybody want to make a comment? It's more like the comments seem to be more the sponsor speed dating. Oh, thanks, Kathy. Kathy O'Brien's in the session. Shout out. I'm gonna go to the next one so we can do some more hard ones. God, any comments, just add them into the chat and we'll circle back. All right, hot topic. Keep going, Jordan, you're on a roll.
All righty. Proctoring software collects social security number, driver's license numbers, or passport numbers, fingerprints, face prints, voice prints, iris and retina scans, IP addresses, and device identifiers, browsing history, search history, medical conditions, physical and mental disability, photographs, video, audio recordings, education, and employment info. 1, no concern with this. 2, concern with this. Ready? Oh, go ahead. Yeah, just go ahead and drop it.
All right, someone's laughing. What do you, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jordan.
This one tends to be leaning one direction, I will say.
I'm curious if any of you had to navigate this during the pandemic, that tension. So a lot of the privacy work is about balancing, right? So what is the use of data? What is the data processing? Why do we want to do it? And then what do you balance? Like, how do you land? It's tricky, right? Because you want to have authenticity in your testing. You want to make sure people aren't cheating. But it's a lot of data. And Laura, tell us what you're thinking about. What are you seeing?
We have run into this.
Yeah,
At
I
our
figure everyone
institution.
has.
I think we all have in one way or another. And so this proctoring software, this data that they're collecting on our students is hosted on somebody else's server. And yet we feel that our institution is somehow accountable for it, you know, that there's some kind of liability there if something happened to that information and it was released to the wild. So not only do we need to really look at who the vendor is and what they do with the data, but I think we also need to look at what's our liability here and what do they what are their security standards for keeping our students' data safe?
Mm-hmm. Try to get to one more. I'll share a little bit. When we had this conversation, we had students in our session. Were you going to say, Jordan, what the students said in our session? I'll let you share it.
Well, yeah, students, as you can imagine, are not huge fans of proctoring softwares. And this one, it really gets students going because they just don't like the idea of it collecting so much information, don't like the idea of being watched by a computer and not knowing where all that information is going. So while it might not collect all this information, if it's still recording you while you're taking the test, a lot of students have made that clear to us, and pretty much everyone, all their professors and stuff like that they're really uncomfortable with that idea of them being constantly recorded and having kind of that knowledge of, they don't know where that recording's going. They don't know where, you know, their retina scans and things like that are being kept. And it brings an interesting conversation, not just with proctoring softwares, but third parties as a whole, and managing your vendors and how your vendors collect data, right? Because there's a whole another conversation around that we could talk about for hours about, you know, dealing with, you know, if you're third parties, what is the university responsible for, right? So
that was a big part of it. And then the other thing we heard from students was like, yeah, we still think students are cheating, so just don't even proctor and give us a time boxed exam and you can get it done or not, and let everybody be like more equal, which was interesting to use you don't need to use technology, just shorten the time and let everyone be a little more quiet, which is
students will always find a way. If they're going to cheat, they're going to cheat.
Right. Except at Ohio State, that never happened. It was just a story we told. Let's do one more quickly, and then we'll break for questions. We'll have about 5 minutes left. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah.
I'll let you read this one.
Alrighty, so number 4. At the start of the term, Woodley faculty advisors outreached students who are predicted to do poorly in their classes with a special note of encouragement to stay ahead of the syllabus, participate in study groups, and to attend office hours. Get your answers ready in the chat, and I'll give a countdown here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
what do you think? So like, don't like, let's not fight the scenario. So like, just assume the analytic works. I agree. There's probably like, what do you mean? It predicts to do poorly. There's 100 variables, but just if it did work, would it be okay for the faculty member to reach out? Oh, every student. I love equity. Like this whole thing of like special, this is the thing we counter a lot in our analytics discussions. It's like, we're going to apply an analytic or resource to a subset of all students. Which is, we end up talking about that more than even the analytic. Most students need this. How early in the semester? The first day, say that you're teaching Chem 102 and they did poorly in Chem 101. I'm a little bit with the weird. So I'm teaching class this semester and we were like, we're not going to do, we're doing office hours if you need them. So call us. And so now I'm wondering, making sure you're available is an interesting recommendation. Oh, opt-in service. Oh, can't make predictions, but if you're predicting based on prior performance or where the school student came from or how often they've been on campus or how they work out, or you can correlate how many friends do they have, so how do they travel around the university, could be an analysis. All right, anybody have any words they want to share? Any thoughts on this one? Hi, Anne.
Hi, I'm back. I have a thought. I mean, this is concerning because historically and currently all of our institutions have major discrepancies in our student populations and our, I mean, faculty and staff, racial discrepancies. I mean, we just have a problem with representation, and I think that permanently colors the data that we might use to do this kind of predictive analytics. We just don't have unbiased data to work with. So garbage in, garbage out, I think this might end up perpetuating racism, classism, etc.
So let's sort of play with that for the last, maybe the next 2 minutes. So there's a desire for the students to do well, and they want to use, so say that administration or the faculty member believes in the analytics, so they believe it to be accurate, and they are not persuaded by bias or it could be wrong. So what is the other lever? So that's why we have the other principles. And so then the other principles we would think through are, okay, be transparent, at least as a start. Go back and check. So what is your process to validate that this analytic doesn't dissolve, like erode over time, that you get the outcome you were hoping you'll get? Could be part of the analysis. What else could you do? I'm not usually fortunate to always be in the place of no, you can't. That's why I have a working group. It's usually like how, or pause, or pilot. What are the other ways you could get to how on this one? What other tools? I like some of the suggestions in the chat. Thanks, Heather, for your feedback. I like some of the ideas around personalization is tricky, but it's nice to send a note to all students and let them know, some of these things. And so then you're inherently more inclusive. Anything else come to mind in our last 30 seconds in the chat? All right. Well, thank you for we have to end, but thank you for your time and participation and engagement in the chat. This whole deck, we didn't get through all the scenarios. I didn't think we would because they're tricky, is in the speaker session. So feel free to join us. And I think our session person is going to help us to the next session. You can find us in the speaker session if you want to have a one-on-one and talk more. Happy to do that too.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Jordan, very much. I'm going to end this in just a second. If you want to join us for the next session, it's the speed dating session with, in particular, Desire to Learn and Top Hat. So if you want to hear what they have to say, they're each going to get about 15 minutes and then some time for Q&A as well. So if you're interested in what they have to say, please join us. Yes, you will get points that go towards some really impressive swag. So please do join us. Thanks all for joining us here now.